Welcome to According to Sam, folks. This is episode 243. Thank you guys for tuning in. Happy Labor Day. Hope you guys have had a great weekend, Labor Day weekend. And I hope you're ready for fall. It's the long haul now between the Labor Day celebration and the campaign for the White House. I mean, it's not like it. We've been in the forever campaign for 15 years now, where the campaign is just from election to election. The campaigning never stops, but the campaign will heat up after today, and you will start seeing a lot more ads. You'll start getting a lot more text messages, a lot more mailers, not only for national elections, for local elections. So it's the sprint to November from here on out. We're going to get back into exactly what we've been talking about in the last couple of podcasts. We've been talking about the Bush-Clinton dynasty. We've been talking about the 24 years of these three presidents. And if you include this guy's father, who is the patriarch of the dynasty, you're talking about 28 years of governance in the United States, of the past, the 4 years of Trump and the 3.5 years of Biden. So you got 28 years, and then you add 4 years of Trump, that's 32. So of the past 38 years, these guys, this dynasty, and if you include Joe Biden, because he's included in this dynasty, these guys have run the country for 34 out of the 38 past years. And this guy he was president for 4. And the narrative that they're telling you, again, is that this guy, the 4 years of this guy entering into politics are the reason you have all the division in the country. It's the reason you have the economic problems. It's the reason you have the foreign problems, all of the problems in the world, even climate change. You can blame climate change on this guy because he got us out of the Paris agreement. And so climate change, we're even going to blame on him. Everything is this guy's fault. And the 4 years that he was in office, it's absurd, but that's what we've been talking about in the last couple of podcasts. And I've been asking the question, who represents in this current election this year, who represents the change? Who is the change candidate? Is it this guy? Or is it this woman, Kamala Harris? Is she the change candidate? She's trying to paint herself as the change candidate, as the turning of the page. And what I've been telling you is that that's kind of difficult for her to do. I mean, aside the fact that she's the current vice president and she's been there with Joe Biden for the past 3.5 years, but she's being endorsed by all of these guys. Well, Bush hasn't endorsed her, but all the members of his cabinet and all his friends and his dad's friends and members of the McCain and Romney campaigns, they've all endorsed her. Bush hasn't yet personally, but we know who he's endorsing. We know who he's for. But the rest of these guys, Obama's endorsed her and his wife. Bill Clinton's endorsed her and his wife. So not only is she the current vice president in office right now and has been in office with Joe Biden, who is part of this dynasty for the past 3 years, she's being endorsed by the entire empire. Like I was telling you in the last podcast, if you are using the Star Wars movie as an analogy, that she represents the empire. All these guys represent the empire. This is the empire, and this guy represents the rebel rebellion. The rebel rebellion. This guy is the change. So I want to get started with this clip of Scott Jennings again on CNN doing the Lord's work over there. This was during the convention. I want you to take a listen.
In all these speeches, as good as they were, is that she's in the White House right now. Democrats have controlled the White House for 12 of the last 16 years. And for all of the talk about division and the problems in the country and people are hurting, Democrats have mostly controlled this country. Trump had it for 4. The Obamas and Biden had it for the rest of the time. And somehow, it's still all Trump's fault, and somehow she hasn't been at the center of it. So to me, that's still the glaring hole in this campaign that hasn't yet been solved at the convention. How do you explain all of the problems that will be solved by the person who is currently in there for the last 3.5 years, who is supposed to already be working on solving it?
Beautiful. Beautifully said. Like I said, Jennings is over there at CNN doing the Lord's work, but he makes it partisan, though. He says that out of the past 16 years, Democrats have controlled the White House. 8 under Obama. And then, what is he saying? 16. He says 16 years. Oh, he says 12 out of the last 16 years. So, yes, 8 under Obama, and then 4 under his vice president, Joe Biden. That's 12 out of the past 16 years. This guy has only governed for 4. But if you include the entire dynasty, I don't know why you got to make it partisan, Scott, because, this is a family. This is the same policy. It doesn't matter, Democrat or Republican. Over the past 38 years, this guy has only governed for 4. So we were talking about that in the last podcast, and then we started getting into the Duchy of California. So the dynasty is the Bush-Clinton dynasty, but the Duchy of California is controlled by a family or a group of families that we were talking about in the last podcast that consists of this guy and his family, the Newsom family, also the Pelosi family, also the Brown family, and the Getty family. And I played this clip for you at the end of the last podcast, and how all 4 of these families have run California for almost a century. And under the governorship of Jerry Brown, his father was also the governor of California in the 70s, and then Jerry Brown was the governor, I believe in the 80s or in the 90s, and then he came back in the early 2000s to be governor. Again, his lieutenant governor was Gavin Newsom, and Gavin Newsom and Jerry Brown, they have changed this state forever. Changed it we're going to talk a little bit about the changes that were made under Brown, Newsom, and Pelosi, because she was in Congress and represented a district there in San Francisco, while Newsom she represented this district in San Francisco, while her nephew Newsom was the mayor of San Francisco, and while Kamala Harris was the DA of San Francisco. So that's what I'm trying to make you understand, is that Kamala Harris comes up from this tree in the Duchy of California, of these 4 families that have run and controlled California. And then I did that show on Friday, and then later on Friday night, Nancy Pelosi was on the Bill Maher show, and boy, it was just serendipitous that I had talked about this in my last podcast earlier in that day, and then I had no idea that Nancy Pelosi was going to be on the Bill Maher show that night, and she said a lot, and we're going to talk about some of the things that Nancy Pelosi says in this interview that she does with Bill Maher that fit right in the things that I was telling you in the end of the last podcast. It's going to be fit in perfect. So let's get right back into it. This is a picture of George H.W. Bush. You can see he's talking to Nancy Pelosi's husband. You can see Nancy Pelosi with the hand on the back, this endearing gesture. Also, Barbara here. So this was a photograph that was taken in the early 2000s when she's in Congress, and she says that she was pushing back on George Bush, George H.W. Bush's son, after he had gotten us into the war in Iraq. She says that she knew, because she was on the Intelligence Committee, that George Bush had lied us into the war and that he was lying the whole time. But when the people wanted her to come in and she was elected on this platform of getting us out of Iraq, many people wanted her to impeach George Bush, and that was the setup for the trap that they tried to set for Donald Trump in the South Carolina debate in 2016, asking the question, why didn't Nancy Pelosi impeach George Bush? If you knew that he had lied us into the war, we lost thousands of Americans in that war, millions of Iraqis. It cost us $5 trillion. It destabilized the Middle East. The world is a much worse place today because of the lies that they told. Why did you not impeach him, Nancy Pelosi? And what I was explaining to you in the last podcast is these families all work together. The families that run California and the Duchy of California, they work together with the Bush-Clinton dynasty. They're all friends, and they all work together to loot our country, to get rich at the expense of the American people. And they defend each other. There was absolutely no way that this woman was going to impeach George Bush. She was there to protect George Bush. And at a very minimum, this is something that you need to understand, is because after the 2006 election, when Democrats rout Republicans, take control over both houses of Congress, and the number one issue in that election was the Iraq war, Bush doesn't change course on the Iraq war. He changes his Secretary of Defense, and his new Secretary of Defense, he changes from his dad's friend, who was Donald Rumsfeld, who he put over the Pentagon. And so when they lose in 2006, he fires his dad's friend, Don Rumsfeld, and blames him for the strategy in Iraq. But then he brings on his dad's ex-CIA director, Bob Gates. Bob Gates was his father's former CIA director. Bob Gates, who had served as deputy DCI, deputy director of Central Intelligence under Ronald Reagan, who basically ran the Iran-Contra scandal. Bob Gates did. So Bush doesn't change strategy in Iraq. He doubles down on the strategy, sends more troops in this surge. And the number one issue in 2006, when Nancy Pelosi was made Speaker of the House, was to defund the war. Now that you're in charge, defund the war, end the war, get us out of the war. That's not what happened. Bush puts his father's director of Central Intelligence in charge of the Pentagon, blames everything on Rumsfeld, and then they surge and they double down on the war effort. When Barack Obama comes into office in 2008 on a change platform, he comes in on change. When Obama comes in on the change platform in 2008, he keeps his cousin's director of Central Intelligence in charge of the Pentagon. Of course, Barack Obama doesn't have any foreign policy change after he commits to change. He keeps his cousin's former director of Central Intelligence in charge of the Pentagon. Bob Gates stayed on. And it's so funny that one of the questions that Dana Bash asked Kamala Harris in the interview that she did with her last week, will you promise to put a Republican in your cabinet? And everybody's making a big deal over the fact that Kamala Harris says that she'll put a Republican in your cabinet. That's no big deal. Barack Obama had in charge of his Pentagon George Bush's former director of Central Intelligence that ran Iran-Contra, the guy that Bush put in to replace Don Rumsfeld to double down on his Iraq policy. And if that doesn't tell you, everything, but let's get into this interview that Nancy Pelosi did with Bill Maher on Friday night, and there's a lot said in here. Let's take a listen.
On my scorecard, you got the big ones right. And the big ones are Iraq, you were against going in, the financial crisis in 2008, you bailed out the banks, even though that was very unpopular at the time, and then getting health care done, when a lot of people wanted to throw that under the bus when it got tough, and you kind of willed it into law. Those are the three big ones, right? It's a lot of history.
Except I didn't bail out the banks, but I
So I don't know if you hear what she says here. She says, except I didn't bail out the banks. Yeah, you're Speaker of the House. The banks don't get bailed out unless you pass TARP through the House of Representatives. And we're going to talk about this in the next podcast. I've been wanting to talk about this because this goes back to Kamala Harris's financial policies that she put out 2 weeks ago. And I have to draw the comparison to what she's proposing and the financial crisis, the 2008 financial crisis, because you have to understand what each one of these men, the role that they played in the financial crisis. And each one of these men from this dynasty played a role in the financial crisis. Now, the financial crisis, we call it a financial crisis, but it wasn't a crisis for everyone. If you have read the book, The Big Short, or watched the movie, The Big Short, you know that a lot of people cashed in on the financial crisis. A lot of people made a lot of money on the financial crisis, and it wasn't just the people who bought the credit default swaps. Those people cashed in, but there was a lot of people cashed in. So it wasn't a crisis for everyone. It was a crisis for us. But I'm going to explain to you how each one of these men, the role that they played, and we'll get into this in the next podcast, in the financial crisis. But that's what Nancy Pelosi says here. He gives her credit for three big things that she did as Speaker of the House, that the Iraq War, he says that you were right on the Iraq War. But what did she do? She didn't do anything to stop the Iraq War. She didn't stop the funding of the Iraq War when she became Speaker of the House. She didn't impeach George Bush. Everything, with the Iraq War stayed the same. And then what they told you is that we got to take this is what they told you. Because she had the power to defund the Iraq War, but what George Bush did is he would go out and use the bully pulpit and says, well, she's not funding our troops. So she couldn't get blamed for not funding the troops when the troops were at war. So she kept the funding going and then said that we got to take the White House in 2008. Even though she had ran in 2006 saying that we're going to stop the war, that we're going to bring the troops home, that just elect us. When she got in, she didn't stop the war. And then what they started saying is that we got to take the White House in 2008 if you want to end the war. That's the only way we're going to win the war, if we're going to take the White House in 2008, except this guy, leaves on his cousin's director of Central Intelligence at the Pentagon. It's all a fraud, but I'm telling you what they told us. So Bill Maher is giving her credit for the three big things that she did as Speaker of the House. I don't know why he's giving her credit for Iraq. I don't know what that has to do with anything. He gives her credit for the bank bailout because as Speaker of the House, they passed TARP, the Troubled Assets Relief Program, which we'll talk more about in the next podcast. And then also the Obamacare, the Affordable Health Care Act. Now, they had a 60-seat majority in the Senate when Obama was elected. 60 seats. That's a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. And then she was Speaker of the House. When Obama was first elected, they could have done anything without a single Republican vote. They could have pushed through any legislation that they wanted to. The very first thing that they work on is the the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. This was more stimulus after the crash, and then Obamacare. And then Ted Kennedy dies in Massachusetts. So now they're down to, and then the number one, when they had the election in Massachusetts to replace Ted Kennedy, the number one issue was the healthcare issue. And the voters in Massachusetts knew if they wanted to stop this massive healthcare plan that they needed to vote for a Republican in Massachusetts is what they did. So they didn't have a filibuster-proof majority. And at that time, they hadn't finished passing the healthcare law. They had passed some in the Senate. They had passed some in the House of Representatives. And she came up with the idea. At that point, even Obama himself was ready to walk away from it. She said, no, we're not going to walk away from it. We're going to use parliamentary procedures, reconciliation, other tricks, and we're going to get this thing done. So those are the three things Bill Maher's giving her credit for. Iraq, which I don't know what the hell he's talking about. The bank bailout, because as Speaker of the House during the crash, she helped pass TARP, and then Obamacare. All right, let's listen again. She says so much here.
On my scorecard, you got the big ones right. And the big ones are Iraq, you were against going in, the financial crisis in 2008, you bailed out the banks, even though that was very unpopular at the time, and then getting health care done, when a lot of people wanted to throw that under the bus when it got tough, and you kind of willed it into law. Those are the three big ones, right? It's a lot of history.
Except I didn't bail out the banks, but okay.
And there's a picture I saw in the book of you and Bush. I'd like to show it, see if you remember it. I think it's when you were broke history as the first woman in that position. And I show it because, look, I was very hard on George Bush.
Listen to Bill Maher. Look, I was very hard on George Bush, like he didn't deserve it. I mean, yes, all Democrats were hard on George Bush after he lied us into a war. I mean, when Bush left office in 2009, he had a 28% approval rating. Yes, Bush is an evil, awful person. And yes, you should have impeached him. But you're not going to impeach someone that you're good friends with. You're not going to impeach someone that you're trying to protect. You're not going to impeach someone who is also protecting you, and you guys are getting rich together. There was no way she was going to impeach him. And even Bill Maher's here, I was too hard on George Bush. He's nothing like Trump, who sends out mean tweets. He's nothing like Trump, that's what Bill Maher is saying here. This is what he actually says it.
Kind of an idiot. No, but he was better than that. I was probably too hard. But that picture.
He was better than that. I was probably too hard. Talking about George W. Bush. Bill Maher, Democrat. He was better than that. I was probably too hard on him. Interesting.
I show it because, look, I was very hard on George Bush. For good reason. Kind of an idiot. No, but he was better than that. I was probably too hard. But that picture says a lot. Because he looks like he's genuinely giving you congratulations. And even though you're on the other side, we're all Americans.
Even though you're on the other side. Are they on the other side? Are they on the other side, Bill? Are they on the other side? What evidence do you have that they're on the other side?
But that picture says a lot. Because he looks like he's genuinely giving you congratulations. And even though you're on the other side, we're all Americans. That Republican is gone, am I right?
That's unfortunate. That was a surprise to me when he came out and said,
yeah, I'm sure.
I am the first president who will ever say, Madam Speaker, and that was a big applause and all that. But then he talked about my father having served in Congress and having been there when Churchill spoke and other heads of state, and he could never have imagined that his daughter would be. So it was a beautiful personal thing that the president did. So, Especially since up until that time, I had been fighting fiercely on the war in Iraq.
Fighting fiercely on the war in Iraq. What do you mean fighting? Up until that time that you were fighting fiercely on the war in Iraq, it was only rhetoric. What she's saying, so up until that time that she becomes Speaker of the House, that they've been fighting fiercely on Iraq, that was all rhetoric. That was all talk. You know, this is what we're going to do, elect us. And then when we get in power, we're going to, put the clamps down on Bush. She didn't ever say that she was going to impeach him, but it was insinuated that we're going to impeach him. We're going to hold Bush accountable is what they said. When she got into power, none of that ever happened. So what she's saying is, that was a nice gesture that on Bush, and when Bush gave his State of the Union in 2007, he is, talking nice to me, and we were friends, and we were, he said nice things about me when I had been hammering him on Iraq. I mean, that was all rhetoric. You never, ever did anything policy-wise to restrain George Bush on Iraq. So, and you didn't impeach him. And we got to wonder why, but I'm going to explain to you why more here.
Especially since up until that time, I had been fighting fiercely on the war in Iraq.
So is there any way to get back to the great times of George Bush?
Listen to this. Listen to this. Not only the Republicans, like Jeff Duncan, who I played in the last two podcasts, and all these neocon Republicans from the Bush campaigns and administration, and the Romney campaign and the McCain campaign, who are all saying that we want our party back. We want to go back to the party of Bush. And the Democrats are saying it too. Bill Maher, Democrats, saying that we want to go back to the party of Bush. We want to go back to the party of Bush. So the Democrats want to go back to the party of Bush, and all the neocon Rockefeller Republicans want to go back to the dynasty. They all want to go back. Everybody wants to go back. So MAGA is in the way. This little movement that started in 2015, 2016, and the 4 years that this guy governed as president of the United States, causing all your problems. We got to go back to George Bush, is what Bill Maher says. Wow. Can we ever get back to George Bush?
On the war in Iraq.
So is there any way to get back to the great times of George Bush?
I think so. I think that it's necessary for our country, for us to move in a unifying direction, to try to take us back to a place where we disagreed, but we were patriotic and loved our country, as opposed to what's happening now. It's essential. It's essential. Can we talk politics here? It's essential that Donald Trump never set foot in the White House again.
So, I mean, they would say the Democrats have changed a lot in that era, too. Do you agree or disagree?
No, I think we've been true to who we are. We are the party of working class people, the kitchen table concerns of America's working families.
Very interesting question here. Very interesting question, because Bill Maher says that they would say that the Democratic Party has changed. They're not the only ones saying it, that the Democratic Party has changed, that both parties have changed. I mean, everybody's talking about it. Play here. This is Robert F. Kennedy, who's been interviewed by Tucker Carlson, and he talks a little bit about this political realignment, how the parties have changed, the ideals, the makeup of the party. I mean, the type of people that are voting for the Republican Party now under Trump, and the type of people that are voting for the Democratic Party and have been since Barack Obama. It's a realignment, is what Robert F. Kennedy's talking about here. I want you to watch this.
What is this realignment that you mentioned at the outset? Because this does feel like it's bigger than just this November.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a series of these realignments throughout American history, and there's history books that are written about the realignments. I think there's about 5 of them, and one of those is clearly happening now because you see on so many issues, you've had an inversion. The Democratic Party has become the party of the elites. It used to be the party of the poor and the working class. In fact, there was a study that came out just recently that I saw that showed that 70%, that the people who voted for Biden own 70% of the wealth in this country. The people who voted for Trump own 30%. And so
I believe that.
Right. So you're seeing this realignment happen where the elites, where Wall Street, where the big tech, big pharma, the big banking houses are all now Democratic. And that the working class, the middle class, the cops, the firefighters, Sean O'Brien, the head of the Teamsters Union, spoke.
Good guy.
A great guy, great guy. Really love him, but he spoke at the Democratic convention. The Republican convention rather than Democratic convention. So you're seeing this big alignment, and even on environmental issues. It's so weird to me because the Democrats have become subsumed in this carbon orthodoxy. And you and I have talked about this, that the only issue is carbon. And what that's done is it's forced them to do something that you should never do if you're an environmentalist, which is to commoditize and quantify everything. So everything is measured by its carbon footprint, how many tons of carbon it produces. And
that's part of the religion.
Basically,
that's part of the religion there. But what he's talking about, the political realignment, the fact that Republicans and Bata, what's her name? She's been on the Bill Maher show. I played the clips of her. She's been saying this. Tons of people have been saying this, is that the Republican Party is more of a working class party now, and the Democratic Party is the party of big business, the elite, the military industrial complex. They're in cahoots with the Republicans and have made a home for the neocon and Rockefeller Republicans in the Democratic Party. In many ways, Donald Trump is running to the left of Kamala Harris, definitely more to the center of Kamala Harris. So there has been a political realignment, and that gets to the heart of the question that Bill Maher asked Nancy Pelosi here, saying, hey, they're saying that you've changed, that the Democrats have changed. She says, no, we haven't changed.
Can we talk politics here? It's essential that Donald Trump never set foot in the White House again.
So, they would say the Democrats have changed a lot in that era, too. You agree or disagree?
No, I think we've been true to who we are. We are the party of working class people. The kitchen table concerns of America's working families have always been ours. They will take an example here or there and try to tattoo all of us with it. But we are a diverse party. As I say, our diversity is our strength. Our unity is our power. And that's why we have to come.
So she says, no, there hasn't been any political realignment. We still represent the working class, kitchen table issues, the issues that are important to families. That's still us. We haven't changed. We haven't made any changes. And then she says that they will use an example and try to paint all of us with it. But actually, Bill Maher has an example here for her, and it is fabulous.
You're from out here. You read the local papers. The California lawmakers just passed a law. It hasn't been signed by Governor Newsom, but giving government assistance to undocumented immigrants to buy houses.
You hear this?
That's kind of a different place than the Democratic Party used to be on immigration, is it not?
So he says that they say the people are saying that the Democratic Party's made some changes. And you guys don't represent the working class anymore, is what Bill says. That people are saying you guys have changed. She says, no, we haven't changed. There's no political realignment. We still, represent kitchen table issues, the issues that working people care about. And then he says, all right, well, I'll give you an example here of the changes you guys have made as Democrats. There is a new law that the California Legislature just passed, and they're sending it to the desks of Gavin Newsom, Nancy Pelosi's nephew. He's getting ready to get this bill. And what this bill does is there is a program here in California that provides down payment and loan assistance to new home buyers. It's called the California Dream Program. And there's some stipulations in this program. I'll play this clip, and it tells you a little bit about this bill that Nancy Pelosi's asked about.
Kina Rambula of Fresno authored AB 1840, which, if signed into law, will allow undocumented immigrants to apply for the state's first-time homebuyers program called California Dream for All.
The state assembly gave the bill a final approval in a 45-15 party line vote. Jason Toctasian has more on what Arambula is saying tonight. Jason.
Tonight, Arambula is thanking fellow Democratic lawmakers for moving the bill forward.
This is where it all comes down to the final week of session.
Assemblymember Joaquin Arambula says AB 1840 rewards migrants who are already contributing to California's economy. On Tuesday, the bill passed on a 23-11 party line vote in the state Senate, with some Democrats abstaining. The Senate sent the measure back to the Assembly, which today approved the bill with a 45-15 vote along party lines. Tonight, Arambula is saying, quote, AB 1840 does not create a new home ownership assistance program for a specific group of people, nor does it give away free money. Already, anyone
it absolutely gives away free money.
Existing California Dream for All loan program's financial criteria.
So, if the California Dream for All program is for people who are first-time home buyers, but also people who have parents that have never owned a home. So if your parents owned a home, you don't qualify for this. So this is perfect. So what the program is set up for Californians, and then this bill allows undocumented illegal aliens in California to also apply for the program and get up to $150,000 down payment assistance. This is the bill that Nancy Pelosi is asked about on the Bill Maher show, when Bill Maher says, hey, Democrats have changed. You guys don't represent working families anymore. And she says, no, we haven't changed, that we're still the same. Well, in California, we have a inventory problem in this state. We have an affordability problem that's caused by the inventory, supply and demand. That's a no-brainer. It is so expensive to live in this state. People are being priced out of the state, having to leave. And while they're doing that, many people are going to the streets and living on the streets, and they're cracking down on the homeless. And while all of that is going on in California, they're passing a bill. The state legislature is passing a bill to give down payment assistance and loan assistance to illegal aliens. I'm blown away by this. Here's a clip about them cracking down on homelessness and the encampments that is accentuated by their policies over the past 2 decades. The Brown, Newsom, Getty, Pelosi families that have run this state in the last almost century. They're the ones who, because of their policies, have exacerbated the homeless problem, and now they are criminalizing homeless in California. Americans, veterans, people that have come back from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, or living on the streets, they're being criminalized. And at the same time, the state legislature is passing a law that would allow for down payment assistance and home ownership assistance to illegal aliens. Blown away.
Governor Newsom's order to clear homeless encampments across the state comes after a Supreme Court decision. But the governor stresses the dignity and safety of those experiencing homelessness is paramount.
Eyewitness News reporter Rob Hayes is live in Eagle Rock with more on the governor's action. Rob.
Yeah, it's been nearly a month since the Supreme Court ruling. The governor making a splash today with his executive order to clear out homeless encampments. And there is no shortage of camps to clear. California has an estimated 180,000 homeless people, more than any other state in the country. More than 75,000 of them are in L.A. County, 45,000 in the city of L.A.
Wow. So, and while this is going on, they're passing laws to assist immigrants illegal immigrants in the state of California. And this is bigger than the state of California, as I'm getting ready to show you. Here's another clip about what's going on with the homeless situation.
Earlier this summer, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that cities can fine or even jail people for sleeping outside. CNN's Nick Watt went to San Francisco, a city with a notorious homeless problem, which is now aggressively sweeping homeless encampments from its streets.
Gotta go, man.
You gotta go?
I gotta go, bro.
But you know where you're gonna go? Okay.
We're in the Mission District. It's a little after 7 a.m.
Is this the first time you've been involved in one of these sweeps?
No. And this is the first time they've been so quiet and nice.
Do you think you'll be in a shelter tonight?
Well, let's hope, yes.
The Supreme Court ruled that cities can now cite, fine, or jail these people, even if they have nowhere else to go.
We have the ability to now enforce the law.
Mayor London Breed introduced what she calls a very aggressive strategy. They issued around 25 citations in the first 2 weeks.
Look at this.
Criminalizing.
This is the city where Kamala Harris got her start as DA when Gavin Newsom was mayor. They helped create this problem, and now they're criminalizing it. At the same time, they are making it more comfortable for illegal aliens to stay and live in this state. And talking about giving resources, even more resources. I mean, this program and this bill that they just signed is only one program. I mean, they have reached out. I'm going to explain something more about that here in a moment, but I want you to take a look at this clip from CNN a little bit more.
A lot of people can't help. They have no other choice.
And that would be the case if we weren't offering people a place to go inside.
So he says that a lot of people can't help being homeless, and London Breed, the current mayor of San Francisco, says, yeah, that would be the case if we weren't offering people shelter, okay? But as you're going to see here in the clip, they don't have any shelters. The shelters are full. I mean, the shelters, because of the illegal alien problem, they don't have any shelters. They don't have any resources.
In the first 2 weeks.
You're criminalizing something that a lot of people can't help. They have no other choice.
And that would be the case if we weren't offering people a place to go inside.
They haven't offered you a shelter?
They said there's no opening for a shelter right now.
There are no openings, no beds.
Plastic bags or anything for trash?
The city says no one from this morning's sweep ended up in a shelter. Not one.
Not one person when he's filming this sweep that they took off the street got a bed in a shelter because the shelters were full. There were none. So California, over the past 2 decades, so many people have moved out of this state, moved to Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, Texas. I mean, you've probably seen the masses of people, if you don't live in California and live in one of these areas, that have moved to your area over the past 2 decades out of the state of California. And this is the replacement. They're telling you that the great replacement is racist and it's not happening. It absolutely is happening. It's happening here in California, and California is the ground zero. But the replacement is happening here because what has happened, I just want you to listen to a little bit of this clip, because what has happened over the past 2 decades under Brown and Newsom and Harris, as people are fleeing California, the migrants are moving in, and now they're talking about giving the migrants and the illegals housing assistance so they can buy houses and set roots here in California after all of these Californians have moved out. That's the replacement. All the Californians move out and go elsewhere, and then the migrants come in across the California border, and now they're still undocumented, but you're talking about giving them housing assistance so they can set roots here. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about the replacement. It's happening right here in California, and Kamala Harris wants to take this nationwide. And I'm going to show you that and prove that to you here in a moment.
Not be who you vote for in the future. ABC's Eyewitness News reporter Josh Haskell explains.
With a decreasing population and demographic changes, California's Independent Redistricting Commission had the difficult job of translating information obtained through the 2020 census and redrawing the state's maps.
So California, and he says, due to population decline and other demographic issues, it's just like I explained to you, population decline. The reason that California over the last a decade in the 2020 census lost a congressional district is because so many people moved out of the states. Same time that those people moved out of the states, the undocumented people are moving in. Now, they can't declare themselves on the census. That doesn't do anything for regaining the number of people that you need to regain that congressional district and that political power. But once you legalize all those undocumented people, then you get that political power back. This is what I'm talking about with the replacement. This is what we're talking about when we talk about the replacement. So what does this have to do with Kamala Harris? Kamala Harris is, one of her economic plans is a $25,000 down payment assistance program. This national $25,000 down payment assistance program is the same down payment assistance program that they passed here in California. The California Dream program, it's the same program. Same program. California passed this bill first, but this is what Kamala Harris wants to take national. The down payment assistance program that they have here in California. In California, here it's up to $150,000. There's no money in the fund right now, but that's what they're hoping up to $150,000 down payment assistance that undocumented illegal migrants will be available to them. So Kamala Harris wants to do the same thing nationally. It's not $150,000. It's only $25,000. But is this national down payment assistance that Kamala Harris is proposing, is it going to be available to undocumented immigrants, to illegal aliens in other states? You better believe it. You better believe it. This is a tweet that J.D. Vance put out after Kamala Harris came out with this proposal. And you can see J.D. Vance's tweet says here, Kamala Harris wants to give $25,000 to illegal aliens to buy American homes. This will only further exacerbate the housing shortage in our country. It's a disgrace. Luis Romano. Luis Romano is a reporter who formerly was the editor at the Washington Post. She currently works as a writer for Politico. She is a reporter who retweeted J.D. Vance's tweet saying that Kamala Harris's $25,000 down payment assistance will be available to illegal migrants, just like in California. Luis Romano says, this is inaccurate, J.D. Vance. It only applies to U.S. citizens. And then she comes back a little while later after she went and she looked into it. Luis Romano says, I want to clarify the requirement, since people are freaking out, doesn't appear that you have to be a U.S. citizen. However, applicants must have legal U.S. documentation, social security numbers or taxpayer numbers, and a record of paying rent for 2 years. So Kamala Harris's down payment assistance program will be available to illegal aliens, just like they're doing in California and the law that they just passed, allowing down payment assistance going to illegal aliens. But back to Bill Maher's question, is this a policy change for the Democrats? Have the Democrats always felt this way about illegal immigration? Because I want you to listen to Nancy Pelosi's answer here to Bill Maher's question when he says, have the Democrats changed? Have you guys changed?
To try to take us back to a place where we disagreed, but we were patriotic and loved our country, as opposed to what's happening now. First party, as I say.
A different place than the Democratic Party used to be on immigration, is it not? I'm not going to say that's what the country is going to do, but that's certainly where California passed the law. It hasn't been signed by Governor Newsom, but giving government assistance to undocumented immigrants to buy houses. Mm-hmm. That's kind of a different place than the Democratic Party used to be on immigration, is it not?
That's a different place than the Democratic Party used to be on immigration. Is that true? Is that true that this new law in California and the proposals that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, that the approach that Democrats have to immigration right now, illegal immigration, since Nancy Pelosi says, no, we're still the party of working people, kitchen table issues and stuff like that. Have the Democrats changed on immigration? Before you play her answer, let's answer that question. Here's Bernie Sanders. When was this? 9 years ago, Bernie Sanders, when he was interviewed by Ezra Klein on Vox. And I want you to listen to the question and answer.
What you said about being a democratic socialist is a more international view. But I think if you take global poverty that seriously, it leads you to conclusions that in the U.S. are considered out of political bounds. Things like sharply raising the level of immigration we permit, even up to a level of open borders, about sharply increasing
open borders.
Open borders.
That's a Koch brothers proposal.
Open borders. That's a Koch brothers proposal. That's what Bernie Sanders says. Open borders. What are you talking about? Open borders. I don't agree with open borders. I don't believe in mass immigrations. I mean, I'm a democratic socialist. I'm for workers, is what Bernie Sanders says. Back in the day, he didn't say this now, but this is what he said back in the day.
Open borders, about sharply increasing
open borders.
Foreign aid.
Open borders. That's a Koch brothers proposal.
When he says that's a Koch brothers proposal, what is he saying? He's saying that's a right-wing proposal. That open borders and mass migration into the United States to keep wages down, that is a Koch brothers proposal, is what Bernie Sanders said. That's a right-wing proposal. That's not us on the left here.
Open borders.
Foreign aid. Open borders.
That's a Koch brothers proposal. The
really?
idea.
Really?
I mean, that's a right-wing proposal, which says essentially there is no United States.
But it would make a lot of the global poor richer, wouldn't it?
And it'd make everybody in America poor. Then you're doing.
And it would make everybody in America poorer, is what Bernie Sanders says. He seems to have understand that mass immigration and open borders is bad for workers, that it makes workers poorer. He seems to have understand this 9 years ago. I don't understand what happened. Nancy Pelosi says they're not changed on this.
America poor, then you're doing away with the concept of a nation state. And I don't think there's any country in the world which believes in that. If you believe in a nation state, or in a country called the United States, or UK, or Denmark, or any other country, you have an obligation, in my view, to do everything we can to help poor people. What right-wing people in this country would love is an open border policy. Bring in all kinds of people who work for $2 or $3 an hour. That would be great for them. I don't believe in that.
That's right-wing.
Raise wages in this country. I think we have to do everything.
Listen to him.
To create the millions of jobs. You know what youth unemployment in the United States is like?
Wow, listen, I think we need to raise wages, not open border, because he seems to have understand that if you don't open the border, that the wages for workers will go up. Yeah. What happened to this Bernie Sanders? Let's listen to who I think this is Bill Clinton here.
All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country.
Legal aliens, huh, Bill?
The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers.
So that's why this gets to the heart of what Bill Maher's question is to Nancy Pelosi, because this is where Democrats used to be. What you heard Bernie Sanders say, what you're hearing Bill Clinton say, this is where Democrats used to be. They're not there anymore.
All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers. That's why our administration has moved aggressively to secure our borders more, by hiring a record number of new border guards, by deporting twice as many criminal aliens as ever before.
So that was Bill Clinton back in the day. This is Nancy Pelosi herself back in the day. Listen to Nancy Pelosi.
While we need to address the issue of immigration and the challenge we have of undocumented people in our country, we certainly don't want any more coming in.
Illegal immigration is wrong, plain and simple. Until the American people are convinced that we will stop future flows of illegal immigration, we will make no progress on dealing with the millions of illegal immigrants who are here now and on rationalizing our system of legal immigration.
So let's go back to Bill Maher asking Nancy Pelosi, hey, look, people are saying that the party's changed, that you guys have changed. Y'all don't represent workers anymore. And let me give you an example of the changes you guys have made. California Legislature, under Democrats, just passed a law that would give down payment and loan assistance to illegal aliens while you have a housing crisis in California. You have inventory shortages. People are being priced out of the housing market in your state. And you guys want to give down payment assistance and allow illegal aliens to take part in a program that was created to help Californians get into home ownership. You guys have made changes. And listen to what Nancy Pelosi says.
I say that's what the country's going to do, but that's certainly where California is.
Well, let me just say, immigration had always been a bipartisan issue. I refer you to
But not free houses.
Well, that's not free housing. It's the American dream being available to more people. But understand this about immigration.
They're not American. They're not American. The American dream should be available to Americans, Nancy Pelosi. The American dream should be available to more people. What? We're going to make the American dream available to all of the third world, to everywhere? I mean, how are we going to do that? Explain to me. Explain the logistics of that.
Is going to do, but that's certainly where California is.
Well, let me just say, immigration had always been a bipartisan issue. I refer you to
But not free houses.
Well, that's not free housing. It's the American dream being available to more people. But understand this about immigration. The best speech on immigration was by President Ronald Reagan. This is the last speech I will make as President of the United States. I want to communicate a message to the country I love. And he talked about the Statue of Liberty and the beacon of hope it is to the world, and what America was preeminent in the world because our door was always open, and we will cease to be preeminent when we shut the door. Now, I don't do justice to the great communicator. Google it. It's a fabulous speech. And George Herbert Walker Bush continued in that respect for the diversity of America. And
So listen to so Bernie Sanders says, open borders. That's a right wing. That's a Koch brothers policy. That comes from the right wing. That's not us. We're Democrats. We believe in protecting workers. We believe in a secure border. And then when Nancy Pelosi is asked about it and says, and Bill Maher says, you guys have changed. You guys have changed. Who are the examples that she uses? Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush. These are the examples that we're using, that she's using to defend what is happening in California and what Kamala Harris wants to take national. She's using the right wing. And Bernie Sanders says, this is a right-wing policy. This is a Koch brothers policy. And she's saying that my defense for this and for my immigration policy and the way I feel about immigration now is Ronald Reagan, is George H.W. Bush. Wow.
I don't do justice to the great communicator. Google it. It's a fabulous speech. And George Herbert Walker Bush continued in that respect for the diversity of America and the rest. California's always in the lead. Maybe others will follow that lead, but that's up to those states.
Harris is following.
Last year, with beautiful diversity.
So you'd vote for this law?
Excuse me?
So you'd vote for this law?
Well, I'm not familiar with exactly what it is, but
you know what it is.
American dream of home ownership available to all people is something we have to do for people who are here now.
This is before you're a citizen. This is undocumented. This is for the undocumented.
Well, what I would like to do is move them to documented. The fact that we can move them to documented.
I'd like to move them to documented. Then we get that congressional district back that we lost because all of the people who couldn't afford to move out of here, native Californians, they had to leave, and then the undocumented people come in and replace them, and then we get them documented. Then we get that political power back. She wants to get them documented. Very interesting. So Kamala Harris is, she believes in the same thing, but she's going out and now she's painting herself as someone who's tough on the border. I'm going to secure the border and all that. Meanwhile, as I've shown you, her down payment assistance program goes to illegal aliens as well. But she's going to tell you that she's tough on the border. And she's running this ad. I want you to take a look at it.
Kamala Harris.
Check out how many times she shows the border wall in this ad after she criticized the border wall, called it racist and all of that. Vanity project is what she says. And now she's running on the border wall. This is all, I mean, if you believe this, then you dumb.
Harris has spent decades fighting violent crime. As a border state prosecutor, she took on drug cartels and jailed gang members for smuggling weapons and drugs across the border. As vice president, she backed the toughest border control bill in decades. And as president, she will hire thousands more border agents and crack down on fentanyl and human trafficking. Fixing the border is tough. So is Kamala Harris.
So you heard the part about as vice president, she supported the toughest bipartisan border security bill that has been brought forward. It was in the Senate only. We all know about this bill that was negotiated with Langford out of Oklahoma, and they called it bipartisan. Horrible bill that was only introduced in February of this year. What about what happened in the Biden administration prior to February of this year? What about in the Biden administration suing the state of Texas or ending the stay in Mexico policy, and the state of Texas sued the Biden administration, but Biden administration suing the state of Texas to get them to move the buoys out of the water, to get them to remove barbed wire. I mean, making it hard on the state of Texas to defend themselves against this illegal immigration the entire time they're in office. And then in their last year, in February of the year that they're running for re-election, they introduced this bill, which was not a standalone border bill. If you don't remember, this was a Ukraine funding bill where they just threw the border stuff in so they could get the Ukraine funding passed. I've explained all of that. But in the interview that she did with Dana Bash last week, she's asked specifically about this bill. But Dana Bash, this is one of the questions that Dana Bash asked that was really good, but she doesn't really press Kamala on and force her to answer. But she says that what I just explained to you, why didn't you guys do anything in the first 3.5 years of your administration to secure the border? Why did you wait until February of your last year to do anything to secure the border? Which is a very important question. Even if you believe that Trump killed this ridiculous bill, what did you guys do before that? Kamala Harris doesn't answer.
During the Biden-Harris administration, there were record numbers of illegal border crossings. Why did the Biden-Harris administration wait 3.5 years to implement sweeping asylum restrictions?
Well, first of all, the root causes work that I did as vice president, that I was asked to do by the president, has actually resulted in a number of benefits, including historic investments by American businesses in that region. The number of immigrants coming from that region has actually reduced since we began that work. But I will say this, that Joe Biden and I and our administration worked with members of the United States Congress on an immigration issue that is very significant to the American people and to our security, which is the border. Mm-hmm. And through bipartisan work, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Congress, a bill was crafted.
Such a lie.
Which we supported.
Such a lie.
Which I support. And Donald Trump got word of this bill that would have contributed to securing our border, and because he believes that it would not have helped him politically, he told his folks in Congress, don't put it forward. He killed the bill.
Yeah, the question was why you waited, why you waited for 3.5 years before you introduced the bill or did anything to secure the border. And the reason why is because you're for open borders. But it's not that you're for open borders. The dynasty's for open borders. The people who tell you what to do are for open borders. So of course you're for open borders, because you're going to do whatever they tell you to do, because you're part of the dynasty. You are not the change. I'll be back on Friday. Hope you guys have a great week. I'll see you on Friday.